Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of our podcast. We have been gone for 2 weeks because we've been busy. That's just life. It's been Thanksgiving, it's been Christmas, and we've both had a lot of work, but we're back by popular demand. So here we are. And with that being said, I didn't want to address our hiatus, but let's talk about our topic today. Dad, why don't you introduce it and then we'll get into talking about it.
Okay. We are looking at housing, specifically small houses, tiny housing. There may be some aspect of talking about affordable housing, but we saw an article in a local community paper. We're trying to be more conscious of local news. And so Vicky's been doing a real good job of spreading out our resources there. We're researching or using more resources there. And we saw an article about developments for tiny homes. And then we went and this was last week or so, and we can't find the article. But this was in McKinney. So we've been looking around trying to figure out what's available and what's going on. And I think we're going to open up a little bit about what is a tiny house, what is a small house. And yes, some of these definitions may be coming from Wikipedia. So go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so I actually found the article. I think this is the article. So so just to give you a little bit background, this is coming from Community Impact, and Community Impact is a like hyper local news organization. I did a feature on them for our December issue of the magazine, and they gave me like a stack of like different what do you call it, magazines, editions. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with this. But then I was like, oh, me and my dad can use this to find like local issues in the DFW area as like talking points or whatever. And this is one of the talking points. And then the article, the article itself is called Hope's Path to Begin Construction on New Tiny Homes for former foster care children. Actually, this might not be it because I think the article was just about tiny homes themselves. But anyways, the point of me saying that was, number one, Community Impact, a publication I never heard of until 2 weeks ago, but they do cover a lot of local news issues. So if you want to get like super, super local, look them up. Number two, tiny homes, like this idea of tiny homes in North Texas is exploding. If you look up tiny homes Dallas or tiny homes North Texas, all these articles will start popping up about like all these projects that are going on. So this is like starting to become a really interesting solution to affordable housing and the homelessness issue in the DFW area. So with that being said, what is a tiny house? Dad, your Wikipedia definition.
Okay. Tiny homes, there actually is a distinction between the concept of tiny home and small home. And the difference is a tiny home is up to about 400 square feet and a small home is up to about 1,100 square feet. And it gets real interesting because as the housing market in Dallas has blown up so much and there's more and more new developments and they're going further and further out, even the new homes, the ones that are starter home size or like that, they're only 1,200, 1,300 square feet, which is, pretty much a starter home. It's a small, usually 3-bedroom, 2-bath home. So in general, homes are getting, for people, are getting smaller, but the affordability problem, it still exists. 1,200, 1,300 square foot homes are still costing over $200,000. And that's a pretty big chunk of money for a home that, is basically being built for a young family. It's a starter home. And so that gets to be still a little bit of a burden financially to get there. But then in regards to that, there are actual developed communities in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Now, Dallas proper, Fort Worth proper, no, but the general idea of them is out there. And I'm going to try to see tiny house communities. I've got a list here of a few: the Preserve of Texas, Tiny Lots on the Prairie, Lake Dallas Tiny Home Village, the Bird's Nest Tiny Home and RV Community, Camp Scissor Trail Tiny House Community, Monarch Springs. And then there are actually builders, and I'm not going to advertise, so I won't get into all the builders, but if you do your internet searching, you can look up builders for tiny that build in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And of course, there's across the country. Now, going back to what Victoria said earlier about addressing the homeless situation, Los Angeles is really working on this, and they are building some really tiny homes for the homeless. They have one development has houses up to 64 square feet. That's an itsy bitsy tiny home, if you ask me. And there's obviously with these kind of developments, there's no land.
Feet? How many
64, 64,
oh,
not even 100.
4. Okay. Yeah. Cause I was like, wait, hold on.
They're boxes. Just
what
basically,
is that? Yeah,
they're built boxes. I saw a picture of them.
That's a room.
People can put something on they paint up the front of them, but there's no space between them. They are just basically boxes butted up against each other. But
is that housing?
They call it housing.
Running water.
I didn't see about utilities.
To me, that's not housing if it doesn't have utilities, because it's like anyone can, I don't know, anyone can build a box.
Yeah, is it a box instead of a tent?
Yeah,
because basically that's what it is. Are boxes instead of small tents spewed across underneath bridges and overpasses and fields next to highways and things like that. So, but that's Los Angeles trying to figure out a way to deal with their homeless crisis, and they're putting up the money for that. Again, that goes back into doing it. But I did see one picture, and it was just a line of them, and there was a small alley-sized street in front of them that you could walk down to get to them. So it was pretty interesting, but it's an interesting concept in trying to deal with homelessness. Now, housing affordability, of course, is different from dealing with the homeless. And so we had two aspects of this tiny house, small house that can be used. One that builders build, people move into, and they buy, and they own the home, and hopefully it would be affordable, living. And then, of course, then you use the real small ones and find areas to stash them in for the homeless to live in, to get them out of the just spread out across the community. So that there's two ways these can be used. So it's interesting how people are going to address this and how they're going to use them going forward.
Mm-hmm. So it was kind of hard to find pricing on tiny homes, simply because there was one place that I saw that would build a fully functioning tiny home, and their prices range from $79,000 for a 24. I don't know how to I'm not very good with dimensions or anything like that, but basically it's just a very, very small house that you would literally hitch up to the back of a truck, and it's like these tiny homes look mobile, right? And it says that it says starting at $80,000 for this very, very tiny. It's equivalent to an RV, and so except that it looks more like a house than a mobile vehicle. So, but the size is equivalent to an RV, except for maybe wider than just narrower, because it says there's 2 bedrooms and all that stuff. Which is crazy to me, number one, because I guess I can see the appeal, because you can just pack up and move anywhere and just take this RV just moving home or whatever. And I also saw that there's places where you can put these moving homes, and you can use them, and you can go to a place these tiny home communities, and the tiny home communities, half of them are actually built tiny homes, and the other half are, you can rent this lot space for your tiny home, and that costs $600 a month. And I'm okay, so either way,
where does the cost? Yeah, you just keep adding to the cost when you do that.
Yeah,
usually when you look at, and I don't have a calculator in front of me, but in general, when you look at how much a house you're getting, to be able to compare it, is you do how much is the cost per square foot. So,
Okay.
you know, if a 2,000 square foot home costs, and I'm just going to make random numbers, I don't have a calculator, but let's say
You have this
100.
calculator
Yeah, but we're going to get into some math here.
broken. Yeah.
Um, no, it's not. It's just a lot of math. But,
Mine
you know, you
is.
get into a 2,000 square foot home, which is, you know, a little bit bigger than, you know, it's a nice home. You get 4 bedrooms in there, some space in there. And it's, you know, $150 a square foot. But, you know, you buy a tiny home and it's also $150 a square foot. You know, are we getting, what kind of bang for the buck are we getting with these tiny homes if they're just per square foot the same cost as a full size home, so to speak? And so technically that does not make them cheaper. It just makes them smaller. And, you know, so, but you're not getting a deal where it's a benefit to somebody because they're not really getting an advantage by going small. And so it would be better to save up and get the fuller size house if you're paying the same price per square foot. Now that's one comparison you can make, and that's, you know, how you look at it. But if you're sitting there and your budget is X, then, you know, whatever size house you can get, you're going to get that if you want a house. And you have to compare it to rent rates. Now, rent rates, of course, we all know have gone through the roof because of the pandemic, and there's less and less affordable, or less and less just housing inventory, whether it's large scale or mid-size or small. And I'm not talking about small house, but, you know, 12, 1,300, 1,400 square feet homes. There's just not a lot of inventory out there. So, you know, you also have to look at the cost of how much is it going to cost to rent versus how much am I going to pay in mortgage. And that's not always an apples to apples comparison, because a home, you have property taxes, you have home insurance, you have your own maintenance bills. So if anything goes wrong, that's coming out of your pocket. So all this is part of, you have to consider when you're making these kind of decisions. But if small homes on a square foot basis are less expensive than some of the newer full homes, then, you know, this could be a great option for affordable housing.
Well, this is where I have two questions in regard to these tiny home communities. Number one, are they a net benefit for Dallas in terms of real estate? I don't think so. I don't think, well, okay, you made a face when I said that.
No, that's okay.
And I say net benefit, when I mean benefit in terms of real estate, I mean more than just affordable housing. I mean places where people actually have a place to live that's not just a box. Number two, like from the consumer side, you know, and then I'll get to the more social issues. Number two, now the social issue side. Besides it, the question of whether it being a net benefit for Dallas and the Dallas real estate market in terms of homelessness, a couple things. Number one, it's when you have a home, there's that you can set up your life in a way for you to thrive, to succeed when you're not on the streets every day, right? So then that's not necessarily my issue. It's just that sometimes it's like it's good to create these like homeless housing solutions, but we also need to partner that with like other solutions as well. So it's like on from the social issues, homelessness side, I don't really have a like I don't have like I'm not here to like opine or like share my opinion. I hope I use that word correctly. But and mostly I see my role as asking questions. I don't really have that many questions in regards to how this is going to work, because it's not, because like what happens is I guess Dallas will buy land and like partner with contractors to build these tiny homes. And then of course, you know, taxpayer money goes into that, right? But it's like I also want to see other solutions in addition to the tiny homes thing. So I don't really, that's not my issue, because I feel like that's actually like a very, like I can see that being a very structured model for solving homelessness issues in Dallas. My issue is that there are these contractors buying land and building these tiny houses, and kind of going on the point you said earlier that these tiny homes aren't necessarily like more bang for your buck, because you're just having the same, I guess, so you have like the square footage. What's like the average, yeah, what's like a good square footage for a house for a 4 bedroom? What would that be?
2,000. I use that as kind of a round number. It's not large, it's not small.
Yeah.
4 bedrooms, fits in there comfortably. You get a large living room, you get a kitchen, dining area.
So
You're not hurting for space in a 2,000 square foot home. You're
yeah,
not going to be
2000.
expansive at all. Yeah.
Yeah. So then if you shrink that to what, like 500?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just using random math. Let's say the 2000 square foot home is 500,000. Or let's say, like, does that sound right? 500,000?
I'd say 3 right now,
Three
about 3.
300,000? Okay, so
Yeah,
then
give a break.
you shrink that to, what is it? To something that's like 200-foot home. Does that sound about right for a tiny
So
home?
God, stick with your 500 foot
500
square
foot.
home because
So
that's
you, so you have a 500-foot tiny home that's being sold for $80,000. To me, that's not the solution for affordable housing that's realistic. You know what I mean? Like $80,000, like that's still a lot of money in regards to like where income is, if that makes sense. Because it's like, it's not a long-term livable house. A tiny home is not a long-term livable house. If
no,
you want to
you're not
have
going to raise a
family,
family. Yeah.
it's for single people, right? Like
Yeah.
single people, like it's temporarily for single people. And I see this as like these prices where these tiny homes becoming more for like family homes. And it's just like, this is not long-term, like this isn't an investment. This is a temporary thing. That's why I don't see tiny homes as being the solution for rent prices and all that stuff, and in the rent market and all that stuff.
Yeah. And you bring up something that is a topic probably beyond the scope of this that I'm going to talk about is most people buy a house to build wealth or to have wealth.
Yeah.
It's an investment. They expect the value of their home to grow. So at some point they either sell it and can move to a bigger house, or they did what your parents did, sell it and downsize because all the kids are moved out. So that's a good point in regards to what are the long-term prospects of owning a small home or a tiny home. You get into a starter home, there's a market for it again. Some other young couple is going to come in behind you and buy it, and you see you have a market to sell it. But with these tiny homes, if you're a single person, you don't want to live in it forever, but are we moving to a society where that's going to happen for some people? And do they get any value out of this?
But yeah, and that's the other thing. Like these things break down. Like the point of buying a home is you also have land that you buy for that home,
Yeah, you got a
and the
lot.
land is really what's valuable, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like that's
And
I think that's maybe the major point that I was getting to, and like that long tirade I just did, is the fact that like these tiny homes, they're not going to survive. I don't see them surviving past 5 years. They're not like
they're not
sustainable.
bricks. They're made
Yeah,
of wood. It looks from the pictures I've seen, they're
yeah.
not brick houses. Even in you can get a wood house that's pretty solid made, much more than maybe some of these tiny homes, because there's only so much you can put into a home to make it structurally sound when they're this small. And I'm going to go back to another point you made, bring up something else in regards to living in a tiny home. There's also the concept of community, and because of the price of them, if you're going to make them where people can afford to buy them, you can't put them in, like I said, DFW proper, because land's too expensive for something like that. So you're moving them to the outskirts of DFW, and that leads, how far do these people have to go to get to a grocery store? How far do these people have to go to get to a restaurant? How far do these people have to go to get to a doctor, a hospital? And so the costs can bring up, there's secondary costs that could come about because of this if they're too far out, if there's not other aspects of having a community along with it. To your homelessness problem, if you build these tiny homes, they're not going to build them in DFW proper. They're going to stick them way out there on the edge. And again, do they, one aspect, and we'll just say it, that some homeless people have mental health issues. Do they have the ability to get treatment when they need treatment? Are they going to have access? Are they going to be a problem for their neighbors because they are untreated, mental health situations? So there's a lot to digest in doing this. On the surface, buying a small home, if you could get a small 1,000 square foot home, even if it's out there on the periphery of the area, but it was near some shopping, some, community aspects, and, a neighborhood built up around it, where maybe even though it's a small home, you could still have families with 1 or 2 children in there, and an elementary school that serves, they become within an area of an elementary school and junior high and high school and all that. Yeah, that there might be some viability to that. But once you get to the concept of a tiny home under, 400 square feet, who's living in that? And they're probably better to be mobile, and maybe a retired couple could use it. And they got grandkids in, Kansas City and San Diego and Idaho, then they can move around and spend time with each of their grandkids. But that would be the same as an RV. So what's the point? RVs are built to be mobile. There's established RV communities that you can stay at. So is this a market that's viable? Another way to do it, and this, your brother has some land out in far from civilization to a small extent. It's just not near a community. Putting tiny homes on there would be something to do, or small homes. But again, you have to build in a community to make them worthwhile, i.e., where's the shopping? Where's the eating? Where's the being able to do something, the entertainment factor? Because that's what a community has. It has shopping and entertainment, and of course, healthcare, the ability to get healthcare and hospitals nearby. And so these are all things you have to consider if you're going to make this leap, even if they could get the price down where they made, their conceptually affordable housing. Then, what all else are they offering in having these small houses? And then back to another point, when I was researching this, it drove me crazy. They're building all rent house communities. And this goes back to the problem, talk about, building wealth. If they're going to build 100, 200 houses in an area, and it's part of a city, one of our suburbs, but it's only for the purpose to rent, how does that help people build a long-term future in regards to building up, wealth or some stability, and offering them some kind of idea that they have the American dream, if you're only going to build rent houses? I was a little upset that this concept is now starting to be a major player in the housing market.
Yep. Rent, never own, which is interesting to say the least. That's a whole nother rabbit hole that we could go down, but we're not going to, because we don't have enough time. Yeah. So final thoughts on my end, and then Dad, I'll kick it off to you. Number one, tiny homes are temporary homes, which are good for the homeless solution, right? In partnership with other solutions. Tiny homes are not forever homes that you want to invest in, unless you're traveling across the country and all that stuff. No, this is just a regular, and you're not Alexander McCandless or whatever his name was that went off in the wilderness. They're not homes. They're not an investment. And I'm getting concerned because I'm seeing these becoming the solution to not affordable housing in the sense that like the like, because affordable housing, that's like a certain term for housing built by government, isn't that right?
No, it's they make some agreements, like you get affordable housing, and you get a multi, let's say a development with multi-purpose, and you have homes and you have multi-family developments, which is apartments, and they say affordable housing is, they say X percentage of this development,
right? Yeah,
has to reach, has to be available to people who make 80% of the median income or something like that.
So my point about that is that these tiny homes as being the solution to affordable housing doesn't really do anything for rent overall, as rent is continuing to spike ridiculously. So that I don't see that as being a good solution for like this whole rent issue. We're renting a one-bedroom apartment is like $2,300, and or $2,500, $2,700, And so I don't see these tiny homes as being the direct answer to that issue. So yeah, those are my two final thoughts. Off to you.
And that's the big crux of the argument. The concept of affordable housing is a big big conversation in America right now, because a lot of America, much of America, or good chunks of America, have housing cost problems. And obviously it's mainly in the big cities, because there are people moving there. There's a couple cities that you can probably find some affordable housing, but because they've had huge transition out of those cities. But for anything growing or anything that's stable, maybe not growing but not declining, housing is very expensive, and less and less people are able to buy a true home to build a family in, grow a family in, and then hold to own, so they can create a little bit of wealth. Not going to be rich owning a home, obviously, but one of the main drivers of middle class income wealth is their ability of their home to increase in value, and that gives them something that they can rely on, or give to their kids, or the kids can sell and they can all get some cash out of it. So these tiny homes don't offer that same opportunity that, this goes to your generation, is just not getting the same opportunity my generation had to go out and buy a home, and be able to buy a 2,000 square foot home or larger and spend 20 years in it and raise a family, and have a nice size home. Those days are rapidly declining, and that's a shame, I think. And these tiny homes do not solve that problem of being able to give affordable housing to families. It's just a stopgap measure for either tiny homes, to be used for the homeless situation, or transient populations. But we really don't have much transient population in this country. Most jobs are settled. We're not building out the frontier like we did in the 1800s, where something like tiny homes would, be viable because you should keep moving.
But we're not in the 1800s anymore, and we got 2 minutes to wrap up.
Anyway, I'm just trying to give some comparison, but that's the questions you need to ask yourself if you're looking at a tiny home.
Don't.
But a small home, the real issues we didn't touch on, the in between the small home, where you got 800, 900 square feet. That's smaller than the average apartment. Most apartments are around 1,000 square feet. So, but do you own it, and can you increase value? That's not an answered question right now. And that's something we need to find out if that's going to be an answered question. Is there a market behind you having one built and living in it for 5 years? Is someone going to come behind you and be able to buy it and feel it's useful and beneficial to them, and also potentially grow in value, or at least hold value, so you have something at the end of the day when you do move on?
All right. Well, thank you for tuning in to this episode of our podcast. We will continue to bring you more episodes, hopefully on a weekly basis. We don't know because of the, because of the holidays. But we are super excited to continue into the new year with our podcast. And I hope everyone has a wonderful holiday weekend. All right. Thank you.